And in Beijing, the Canadian embassy there was the focus for developments in this story, with foreign diplomats joining Canadian officials in a show of unity. Freelance reporter Patrick Falk was at the embassy too, and he tells us that embassy officials also were able to link with the Canadian ambassador who attended Spavor's hearing in Dandong, China.
As you may be aware, there's been an uptick in cases of COVID-19 in China, and authorities have in particular been telling people not to leave the capital unless it's absolutely necessary. So the embassy organized for diplomats and for media that would have wanted to attend the court's verdict in Dandong but weren't able to. And we were able to track the movements of Ambassador Barton. He was in Dandong, and we know that he was able to attend the verdict as well. So we were closely monitoring exactly what was going on the entire morning, and only moments after the gathering had arrived did we get that sentencing and that verdict. As you say, Michael Spavor was found guilty of espionage, sentenced to 11 years in prison. He's been ordered to pay a fine of 50,000 renminbi, that's about 9,600 Canadian dollars, and he is to be deported. There were 50 diplomats there today from 25 different countries there to offer their support to Michael Spavor and to stand in solidarity with Canada. And there was also this huge outpouring of condemnation and regret over China's actions that were being displayed in the embassy on a sort of Twitter feed from governments around the world. And also there was a statement issued by Ambassador Barton earlier on as well. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
We've maintained from the beginning that Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are being detained arbitrarily, and we will continue to call for their immediate release. And we will continue to work tirelessly to secure their freedom. That will be doubled down.
And Patrick, as we mentioned off the top there, it's still a lot of uncertainty, right, around Michael Spavor and what happens next. Do we know anything more about his condition?
Yeah, that is right. We don't know an awful lot, but we know that Ambassador Barton did go and see him after the verdict was announced. He went to his detention center, which is about 40 minutes outside the city of Dandong, and was able to meet with him. And he actually was able to relay a message from Michael Spavor, who wanted to thank his supporters and tell them that he was in good spirits, and also that he wanted to come home. We don't know, of course, when that's going to happen. A lot's been made of that point that he's to be deported, but the reality is that isn't clear right now at all. It could happen in a matter of days. It could happen at the end of the 11-year sentence. He has been detained in China now for a total of 976 days. So no doubt very keen indeed to get back home. But we don't know at all what's going to play out over the coming days. We know that he is able to issue an appeal, and also Ambassador Barton was able to elaborate on a few details about the actual espionage charges. Not an awful lot, but he said, as far as he understood, he'd taken some photographs in an airport and had perhaps taken some images of some military aircraft, and he was accused of sharing that information with foreign countries.
We're also watching, of course, for developments in the case of the other Michael in this, Michael Kovrig. What do we know?
Again, not an awful lot, and that is a key part of the puzzle, of course. So much of what happens to Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, as far as many people are concerned, really depends on the outcome of the case of Meng Wanzhou. We asked Ambassador Barton if he had any further details about that, and he was also asked a question today in that gathering via live link, what sort of negotiations were going on behind the scenes, and to try and secure the release of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, and also clemency for Robert Schellenberg. And he couldn't go into details exactly, only to say that there were intense discussions and intense diplomatic efforts that were ongoing.
Reporter Patrick Falk in Beijing. Let's go live to Ottawa next. Hilary Johnstone joins us with the latest from there. Hilary, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau released a statement very early this morning after the verdict. What does it say?
That's right, Asha. So in the very early hours of this morning, and it was really a very similar sentiment to what we heard in that message from Ambassador Barton as well. So condemning this sentence and also saying that Canada views both of their detention as arbitrary. So in part, that sentence from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reads, China's conviction and sentencing of Michael Spavor is absolutely unacceptable and unjust. Today's verdict for Mr. Spavor comes after more than 2.5 years of arbitrary detention, a lack of transparency in the legal process, and a trial that did not satisfy even the minimum standards required by international law. Now, we've also had a statement, again, very early this morning from Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, Marc Garneau. Again, a very similar sentiment, condemning this sentence, but also saying that Canada remains committed to both these Michaels and remains committed to bringing both of them home. And in part, that statement also said that Canada is grateful to the many countries that have joined the call for the release of Canadian citizens arbitrarily detained in China, of course, referencing all those diplomats that Patrick was speaking about who came to that embassy, Canada's embassy in China. The statement goes on to say Canada continues to explore all avenues to secure Mr. Spavor's release. Securing his release as well as that of Mr. Kovrig remains our top priority. So that is what we are hearing out of Ottawa this morning, Asha. Now, we are expecting further comments from Foreign Affairs Minister Marc Garneau later today.
And Michael Spavor's sentence and the reaction, really puts new focus on the diplomatic dispute between Canada and China, the tensions between Ottawa and Beijing. So what more are we hearing about that this morning?
Well, the latest thing is that we've heard these growing calls for Canada to consider boycotting next year's Olympics in Beijing. It's hard to believe that we're coming up to more Olympics with Tokyo just wrapping up, but those Beijing Winter Olympics are set to start in just a couple of months' time. And we were starting to hear these calls for Canada to consider a boycott after Robert Schellenberg's death sentence was upheld yesterday. And Robert Schellenberg is another Canadian. He was originally sentenced to 15 years in prison for drug smuggling. And then about a month after Meng Wanzhou was arrested in Vancouver, his sentence was then upgraded to the death penalty. So following that yesterday, when we got that news from a different Chinese court, this happening, less than 24 hours before Spavor's sentence came out, we started to hear from both Canada's former ambassador to China and then also from Conservative leader Erin O'Toole that they think that Canada should start to consider boycotting those Winter Olympics in just a couple of months' time.
Okay, thanks, Hillary. Hillary Johnstone reporting in Ottawa.